All right. So looking at your title, which you're not being graded on your title, but I like this connection, even though this is kind of overused sometimes in literature. I like how you have this connected, but for future titles, if you do something like this should be a colon instead of a semicolon, because it kind of gives more leeway to describe what mercy killing is. And then these words would need to be capitalized when you get there. But looking at your introduction so far, you have a pretty good introduction, and I really like this part right here. These opposing views make humanity question their personal morals and views on life and death. I think you've got a really good intro with this, and even your thesis. Mercy killing is ethical because the person can choose if they want to endure the seemingly endless suffering or end it, and the euthanizing in hospitals would help in multiple ways. This is a little bit worded weird, but I'm willing to forego that right now, and I may bring that up later. But this is a pretty good thesis that talks about the different perspectives of it. This introduces mercy killing pretty well. And then even the quote, I know who Brittany Maynard is, and this is actually a really, really interesting quote and a good thing to use. My only concern is this dash right here. You have two things missing. You need to introduce who Brittany Maynard is to give a little bit of context to who she is. Because especially if someone else in her class or in general reads this, they may not know who Brittany Maynard is. And this is actually a really powerful quote to start your paper. And it's connected really well. You just need a little bit more context here, and then maybe change some word choice later in your intro. Okay, so this part of your essay with the intro, sorry, not the intro, your body paragraph, I had to think about this one a lot because a lot of people are still doing the 5 paragraph essays, but because you have more, let me see how many you have actually. One, two, three, four, five. So you've got 5 different paragraphs. So that's why your writing is going to be looked at a little bit differently, but in a good way. So obviously, when we're looking at these body paragraphs, we have evidence and analysis, but because of the amount of writing you do, that's why this works. So that this controversial topic is shown in the classic book of Mice and Men. And this is real good to set up kind of the rest of your paper, really, if you think about it. We'll see if it follows up as we look through the rest of your essay. But you're putting this out here to the reader. Why did George kill Lenny? And then you extend that to how this works into real life. So this actually sets up your paper really well to not only have your thesis here, but to explain how we talk about it in literature and different methods, and then it will show up later. The only, oh wait, no, hold on. There's a couple of some grammar concerns that I want to let you know about. So it looks like the main thing, and on your rubric you will see this, but what I look at for grammar are routine errors. So if you have, for example, your main thing is punctuation. So that is like one routine error I'm seeing. So I'm not grading you on if you have this like all over the paper. It's looking at those consistencies. So if you have like comma splices that keep showing up or verb forms that keep showing up, those are two ways that I look at grammar. I'll explain this more in class. Ignore me at this point. Um, Dr. Jack Kevorkian, you need a space between the period and Jack, and then you need the space there. Those need to be separated, and then you have a random capitalized word there. Also known as Dr. Death, he helped terminal patients end their lives in suffering. The only thing is you technically need a comma here because this is still part of the sentence. Uh, well, there are many, many more cases of mercy killing, such as Dr. Jack Kevorkian, also known as Dr. Death. Oh, wait, sorry, I misspoke. You would either use a semicolon if you wanted to put these together, or you need to capitalize that. So that's either a capitalization or a punctuation, but I'm going to leave it as punctuation for right now. Okay, so just so you know, I wanted to look at what your paper would look like when we do more MLA format stuff. So with that, I think your indents are okay. Let me double check. I would have to double check that later. But typically in MLA, when we learn about that more later, you have a 4-page paper, which is some really good writing. So I just wanted to see what that would look like. But moving on, I really like this body paragraph where you're differentiating between the ethical components and you're differentiating between the ways that we see mercy killings that we typically, I don't want to say root for, but are okay with, and talk about the differences between Kevorkian. So you have some good examples and you have the analysis thought out really well. And I really like how you have this question at the end. People have the basic human right of living, so why not have a right to die? That poses a tremendously powerful question, especially following this conversation about assisted suicide and following the conversation about Kevorkian's assisted suicides and those examples in the articles that aren't necessarily professional. The only grammar issue I want to point out is these parentheses. This period should not be here because this is an extension of this sentence right here. It would be ethical if the person being euthanized gets an actual choice. So your period should actually go after the parentheses because the parentheses basically point out that it's not a sentence that you're really integrating in. It's basically an extension of the sentence you have previously. So this is a really good paragraph. And then as we move on to your next paragraph, your topic sentences are pretty good. So your connection between the paragraphs, they're actually really good. And it is hard to connect these ideas between paragraphs a lot. But this is done really well. And it looks pretty good. I'm not seeing any major grammatical concerns, but we do have that parenthesis concern again that I talked about in the previous one. So you can get rid of that period and put period at the end of the parentheses and get rid of both of these and add one there. And the writing style is really good. You have a good diction, you have good sentence variety that is going on throughout the essay. So you talk about kind of the medical component here and how the medical components result in the financial burden on it. So the family would not, oh wait, sorry, wrong sentence. If the person is euthanized, the family would not have to pay for practically useless drugs and hospitalization. In the end, the financial and emotional cost of trying to keep them alive would be worse than just ending it. The family would not have to constantly worry about when they are going to die or if they will ever wake up. So this is a really good sentence that really says, this is my claim, here is my evidence, here's my analysis. So I thoroughly enjoy this component right here. The only thing I would give you an air of caution on is this is a touchy subject, obviously, but in the paper, this is what I would think about. Because you have the components of doing research, which I think is good, but just reconsider the word useless here. That's the only thing that caught me off guard a little bit because there are some things that are a little bit placebo or to like numb the pain or something, but there are certain things out there that I could see that would be a quick catch. That, for example, if you ever do professional academic writing, that's where someone can get you is that use of that word. And then right here, we don't have the greatest transition between paragraphs, but it's okay because you have a main idea that's going on through here. So this is a good question, and I think one thing that would be effective is you don't have so much evidence here. This is kind of hypothetical at this point. So far you've done some real good examples with explaining how euthanasia works and the evidence and doing the analysis with it, especially in here. Even though this is a little bit more hypothetical, you are bringing in some certain evidence and components to it. But the problem with this one is it because they have no use in this world after they become old and sick? This could be the case, but why would that be said about another human? So you have these three questions, which are okay questions to ask, and then you do the difference between animals and humans, but I think you could take this a step further, really. And even though this is brought up with empathy in the articles, I would even wonder if your paper would be that much stronger if you incorporated Candy's dog in this component, because there is a little bit of a difference between Lenny and Candy's dog and how that is treated. So It is not because they are useless, but solely because others emphasize with their pain. This is really powerful. I just think you might have some more evidence you could use here, but other than that, it's pretty good. All right, then moving on. Just a quick grammar thing, and then I'll talk about the content. You have the random capitalization again with mercy, an article, and this does bring up your opposition. I think you can make the opposition a little bit more clear about why it's not ethical in the sense of, I just think there's a few things you can do. But what I do think is interesting is you talk about the nuances and you talk about kind of that gray ambiguous area. And this is exactly what I was thinking as I read the article as well. The article does not explain much detail, like what kind of accident she was in or how long she was in the coma before being killed. So you have this component that it's not ethical, and then you tie it back into Kevorkian and how that works and how it can be done well. So there are a few different ways you can always address the opposition, say it's wrong. And I think this is a good way to show, yes, there are some instances where this has not been right and we address it, but this is the stuff we're looking at. So that is pretty good. And then finally moving on to the conclusion, because I don't want this to be too long, because the writing is really solid in here. Just a few grammar concerns. So in conclusion to this debate on mercy killings, they are ethical. First of all, that shouldn't be capitalized. Thank you for saying they, because there's been some singular plural errors I've been reading. They are ethical because of the person that is suffering is going to die slowly and painfully, then killing them will be better and it would help hospitals and medical professions. Kind of a run on there to be aware of. Letting a person suffer is almost worse than killing them. Hospitals, and as they always said in Harry Potter, there's something worse than death. Anyways, hospitals would have more room and their bodies could be used as organ donors. In the words of Norman Cousins, again, you would want to explain who this is. Death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss in life is what dies inside us while we live. Oh my goodness. Your quotes are really extremely powerful, and I love them. And it just, this is so interesting to me because it's such a powerful quote, and I really like that you saved this for the end, because I will be honest, if you put that quote in the beginning and put Brittany Maynard at the end, it would have such a different response. So I so appreciate you using that quote in the beginning with Brittany Maynard, and then you doing this quote at the end. The only thing you need to do is introduce Norman Cousins and Brittany Maynard and give some context to who they are. We're not typically supposed to give new information in the conclusion, but if you just do a brief thing about who Norman Cousins is, that would be fine. But yeah, this recaps your thesis, and this is really good. So this is a real good paper. The only thing I would say done is you need to look at the grammar component. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. I hit the wrong button, I apologize. But yeah, you just need to look at those grammar components, which are punctuation, sentence structure, and your capitalization a little bit. But overall, good paper, and let me know if you have any questions.